I like to kick off my drawings with the paint marker, putting down some messy, chaotic movement lines. They will create a sense of movement right from the start, which will stay with the drawing all the way through. And I like to kick off with creating a bit of chaos and that I can later on work with and bring some kind of sense into. So I follow up here with the Panpastel. The Panpastel is really great for this next step because it's very malleable. I can add and take away quite easily at this stage, as opposed to when I start using the pastel pencil and the compressed charcoal. When I start putting those things down, those marks are a lot harder to erase into and bring shape out of. But with this makeup sponge and the Panpastel combined, I can put a lot of light, using light touches, I can put a lot of mess into the picture that I can mold and shape. It feels very much to me like clay, taking out a lump of clay and just starting to put in some really rough marks into it and sculpting using this sort of way of drawing. When I work on these drawings, I always keep in mind challenging myself to try and put in as fast as I can the very rough features of a face. And I'm noticing often around the very early stages of a drawing that you can capture something quite wild and free and inspiring if you dare to leave it super simple and very expressive at this point as well. I don't think this particular drawing captured that so much, so if I don't have that experience, I just keep going and then just take it as a practice to just keep working on it and not be too precious about it. Just thinking of it as having a go and just allowing it to run its course. Oftentimes when I do these drawings, they go through some stages where in hindsight, when I go through the recording, it reached a certain point where I really actually love it much better than the finished result. And that's just something I'm accepting as part of the process and making it a bit like drawing in the sand, where you see something coming out and disappearing again, and it's part of the fun. When I first started my drawing journey, it was often a case of I would find myself getting really stuck inside a drawing, and I would get quite precious about it. The more hours I would put in, the more attached I would be to the drawing, and somehow that was just not helpful, not for what I wanted to achieve anyway. And at the first day of uni, I think I learned my most important lesson. I had a very different expectation than what I was about to find. I showed up with this little drawing pad that was the size of an A4, which had been on a list of materials required, that we were required to bring. So somehow I had the idea in my head that we would just be doing some really small work that day. As we stepped into the classroom, our course director announced that today some of us would probably do some of our best work for the entire course. She pointed to these great big rolls of paper, and everybody started helping themselves to meter-long pieces. The energy in that place was explosive. Everybody had shown up with the nerves of arriving at this fine art course on the very first day. maybe it's worth mentioning it was a foundation course degree at Central St. Martin's. So the energy was pretty wild that day because everybody were excited and nervous, and everybody just put out their soul onto their pieces. It was a vastly different experience than what I had envisioned, but quite possibly the best day I ever had in my drawing journey. Up until that point, I'd pursued a very classical way of learning. I had been going to museums with my little drawing pad and sat very quietly and had been drawing the sculptures. But this was a bit more of a rock and roll experience compared to that. Everybody were exploding with ink splatters and ripping paper and doing like crazy collage. So instead of the usual me who would sit and get more and more precious about my drawing, I released something that day and just let loose. Before I knew it, I was drawing with such a freedom I'd never experienced before, and I was ripping my drawing and putting it back together again. The freedom felt absolutely wonderful. It was like I could finally express something more immediate and more spontaneous, and it's that energy I'm looking for, that freedom and expressiveness that I loved and that I want to keep hold of. And that was definitely the biggest lesson that I learned in all of my time of drawing. Maybe it can be summed up in something as simple as it is fun. It's fun. Drawing is fun. And that's what I would really encourage anyone watching this tutorial, that make sure you don't forget how fun it is, and don't be too precious. Don't be too precious about it. I remember that bad feeling in the beginning where you've been sitting with something for so long, but you haven't taken the necessary breaks, or you haven't walked away from it. And when you finally do walk away and you come back, you can see that it's just not working. And that's a really tough lesson to learn, and I've been there many times. But as time goes, I get more and more comfortable with things not turning out the way I wanted them to, and simply trying again. So that was one really important lesson that I learned at uni. I loved being challenged to just jump into a drawing without a plan and just go for it. If I see a reference now and I'm just slightly drawn to it, I'll just give it a shot and not be too precious about it. It's also a place where you can get stuck quite easily is in the choosing of the references. That's why I'm adding in a reference into these tutorials to encourage you just to explore something and not get stuck in choosing a reference. So I try to just explore whatever it is. If that's a slight attraction to a photograph or a picture or anything, I give it a whirl. I just try to explore it and see wherever it takes me. I think that way I've noticed that I'm starting to come further and further into the core of who I am and what my work is about, which has actually been a really long journey with lots of obstacles in the way. And I think one obstacle that's been in my way has been conceptual art, because of it, that was one of the maybe less fortunate things I learned at uni, that obviously they will university will put out quite a few conceptual artists where it's all about the idea. But I think if you start with the idea, you're starting up in your brain, and it's just a different place than what actually really works for me. So this type of drawing style is very much about drawing straight out of your gut instincts and straight out of your feeling. So this way of drawing is about, for me personally, but also what I want to give to you is encouragement to get out of your head and get into your heart and start to just allow what wants to come out and give it a mark, give it a line, give it an expression. So once you start to give yourself permission, I think that is one of the big obstacles to overcome as an artist in progress. So for me, since forever, art has been something that has just captured me, and it's been extremely important. And I think sometimes that sense of importance I've had around it has sometimes caused me to overcomplicate my explanations about, even my explanations to myself, why am I doing this? And sometimes I could get caught in that headspace of asking myself, why am I doing this? And I wonder if you can recognize that inner dialogue. But I actually have really come to notice that that is not a helpful dialogue. It's, I'm doing this, and it's very important, and I'm not sure why, but it comes from somewhere deep within that is almost a little bit beyond words. In fact, it really is beyond words, as it is coming out in images, in marks, in movement. So to sum up what I am talking about so far, lesson 1 that I've learned from uni is to stop being too precious about my work and just be a bit wilder, allow myself to be expressive and experiment, and how to just go in without a plan and make something amazing, which was an absolutely wonderful and very freeing experience. But then at the same time, I also had to unlearn a few things from uni. For example, I had to stop trying to learn how to become a conceptual artist, because that just was not who I was. And I have a huge respect for conceptual artists, but their ideas are born in a different way, completely different way than I would call myself more of an intuitive artist. But that was not really something that was encouraged at uni. We didn't get encouragement in that way. So as the years have gone by, I have learned more and more that the way I express art is something more connected to the heart, and it doesn't need a really clear idea to go before it, and it definitely doesn't need a rational reason, because my motivation comes from a feeling, something I haven't quite managed to put words to yet. at uni we often had to create a brief, an outline of our project and our idea, and I really loved it, but it often felt like it was coming from a different place. So I would have this brilliant idea, but somehow it could feel very disconnected from the actual creation process, which felt like it came from a separate place. Rather than idea, it just came from somewhere else, and it often meant that there was a slight incongruency when I tried to explain what the artwork is about. But this has been a really important part of my journey to kind of unlearn from uni that my work doesn't have to be intellectual necessarily. And it certainly didn't start from an intellectual place. It started from somewhere else, and I had to come to terms with and honor that within me, that and that was okay. It was important in order to untangle some of that web where you can get stuck in your mind, and you can get stuck in the ideas process, and you never get to do what you crave and put those marks down on paper. So unfortunately my kids have just returned from the park, so that's it for today. This is all I will be able to share in this video. If you like this content, let me know. Give us a like and subscribe, that would be so appreciated. Take care and all the best for your drawing journey.